They went to sleep as hunted men. They woke up in a world where their enemy no longer existed. Not defeated. Not overthrown. Gone, dissolved by 3 centuries, erased so completely that the children of Ephesus could not have named the emperor who had wanted these 7 men dead. The empire that had written their names on a kill list had collapsed, been forgotten, buried under cities built on top of its ruins. While they slept. This was not survival. This was not luck. This was Allah reaching into the current of time, lifting 7 men out of it, and setting them back down when the world that wanted them dead had finished destroying itself. In Ephesus, under Emperor Decius, there was a list. A real document. Updated regularly. Every person who had refused to declare the emperor divine, who had refused the incense, the gesture, the performance of submission, was on it. The officials called it a formality. Nobody genuinely believed the emperor was a god. But the gesture was required. And refusing it had one outcome. 7 young men were on the list. Sons of noble families. Educated, positioned, futures already laid out before them. They had everything. And they believed in one God. And they had said so out loud. They met for the last time in Maximilian's house, the night the soldiers were coming. 1 oil lamp. 7 men. The particular silence of people who understand that the life they have known ends at dawn. Yamlicha sat apart, back against the wall, hands pressed against his knees to keep them from shaking. He was the youngest. The quietest. He had always listened more than he spoke, and what he was listening to now was the sound of his own fear, not of death. He had made a kind of peace with that, but of something harder to name. The fear that they had misread everything. That faith was real but their version of it wasn't. That they were about to find out the hard way. He looked at the others. At Maximilian, calm with the certainty of a man who has already decided. At the rest, each one carrying the same weight, wearing it differently. If we are wrong, Yamlicha thought, let us be wrong together. He picked up his dog, small, unremarkable, his since childhood, and held it against his chest. Nobody told him to leave it behind. They left before dawn. Through streets they had known their whole lives, through the gate, across the plain, up the mountain. Into the cave the shepherds knew and the soldiers didn't. They went as deep as the rock allowed. Lay down on cold ground in total darkness. They prayed not with requests, not with bargaining. With surrender. We have nothing left except this, we belong to you. Do with us what you will. Yamlicha set his dog down. The dog circled once and lay at the entrance, facing outward, watching the dark. Then the sleep came, not gradually, not like exhaustion, but like a door closing. Complete. Immediate. One moment conscious, the next not, and in the space between those 2 moments, Allah did something that no human force could replicate. He removed them from time. Not hidden. Not merely preserved. Removed, lifted out of the current of hours that carries everything else forward. The cave entrance turned slowly with the sun each day, east to west, keeping their bodies in light without their knowledge, preventing decay with a precision no human hand had designed. Outside, seasons turned. Emperors died. Languages changed. Cities were built over the ruins of other cities. Inside the cave, nothing. Stillness. 7 young men suspended in a moment that refused to end. The dog did not sleep. It lay at the entrance and watched. Not a night. Not a year. Not a decade. It waited the way dogs wait, without understanding why, without deciding to stop, without anyone to tell it that what it was doing was impossible. 300 years. The dog waited. A shepherd pulled stones from the hillside and opened the entrance. Light entered the cave for the first time in 3 centuries. Yamlicha opened his eyes. Cold stone. Darkness. The sound of his own breathing. He sat up, ordinary disorientation, the confusion of waking somewhere dark, and remembered. The soldiers. The house. The prayer. He looked around at the others stirring beside him and felt a rush of relief so intense it almost knocked him flat. They were alive. It had been one night. They were alive. Maximilian asked what time it was. Someone said they were hungry. The conversation had the texture of young men after a single night's sleep, ordinary, slightly irritable, immediately practical. Yamlicha looked toward the entrance. The dog was there, still facing outward. It turned its head when he moved, and something in its eyes, a depth of exhaustion that no single night could explain, passed through him like cold water. He didn't understand it yet. He straightened his clothes, took his coin silver, bearing the face of Emperor Decius, walked down the mountain toward Ephesus to buy bread. The city was wrong. He felt it before he could name it. The streets were his streets, but the buildings were different. The people wore different clothes, moved with an ease he didn't recognize, spoke with inflections that had drifted from what he knew, the way a river drifts from its old bed. He found a market, held out his coins. The bread seller looked at them, called someone over. A small crowd gathered around a coin bearing the face of a dead emperor, held by a young man who had no idea he was holding a piece of ancient history. Where did you find these? They're mine. From yesterday. Silence. The bread seller looked at him with the expression of a man calculating how to say something that will break a person open. These coins are 300 years old. Decius has been dead for 3 centuries. Yamlicha stood in the middle of the market and felt the ground shift beneath him, not physically, but in the way the ground shifts when everything you understood about reality turns out to have been a smaller picture than the real one. 300 years. He thought about the dog's eyes. They brought him to the bishop. The bishop came to the cave. The people of Ephesus followed, hundreds of them, climbing, crowding the entrance, pressing forward to look at 7 young men standing blinking in daylight, wearing clothes 3 centuries out of fashion, holding coins that belonged in a museum. Their story was later written not in history books but in Revelation, in the Quran, in Surah Al-Kahf, the chapter of the cave. Ashab al-Kahf. Recited by hundreds of millions across 14 centuries. Preserved in scripture the way they had been preserved in stone, permanently, exactly, without a single detail lost. The 7 young men stood in the light and looked at a world that had moved 3 centuries without them. The empire was dust. The list was ash. Every soldier who had known their names had been dead for 200 years. Yamlicha looked down at his dog, which had come to lean against his leg finally, after 300 years of watching, allowing itself to rest. He put his hand on its head. He had no words for what he felt. There are no words for what it means to discover that while you slept, Allah was working. That the danger you could not escape was not escaped, it was outlasted, by a patience so vast and so unhurried it makes 3 centuries feel like an afternoon. They did not live long after waking. Days, by most accounts. As if they had been kept precisely for this, to wake, to be seen, to be proof of something the world needed to witness. When they died, Ephesus buried them in the cave. The dog died the same day. The emperor who signed the kill order is forgotten. The language his decree was written in is dead. The empire is rubble beneath other cities. But 7 young men who lay down in a cave and said, "We belong to you," their story is still being told. In every language. In every country. 14 centuries later. They did not beat the empire. They didn't have to. Allah simply waited for it to finish.